Please don't leave halfway. If the intro is long, skip it, but stay. Your one like and comment can save our family. I will return soon, but now I leave you in the loving hands of James. Let the story begin.
The Greyhound bus wheezed to a stop like an old woman finally reaching her destination, and Maria Brosas stepped onto pavement that cost more than her family's monthly rent back in Millerville, Georgia. She clutched her worn leather suitcase, her grandmother's, and felt the weight of the surrogacy contract in her purse like a prayer both answered and feared. The Hamilton district stretched before her like a movie set, all manicured lawns and iron gates that whispered of generational wealth. Spanish moss draped ancient oaks lining Magnolia Drive, and she could smell jasmine on the afternoon breeze, sweet and intoxicating. This was a world she'd only seen in magazines at the doctor's office, and now she was supposed to live here for 9 months, carrying a child for people she'd never met. Maria adjusted her purse strap and began walking toward 1247 Magnolia Drive, the Hamilton estate, her new temporary home, though calling it home felt like trying on clothes 3 sizes too big. She'd made it 50 yards when she noticed an elderly woman struggling with groceries beside a vintage Cadillac. Without thinking, Maria crossed the street. "Ma'am, can I help you with those?" Maria's voice carried the soft cadence of rural Georgia, warm as summer honey. The woman looked up, surprised. "Oh, bless your heart, dear. These old hands aren't what they used to be." She had silver hair, perfectly styled, and kind eyes behind pearl-rimmed glasses. Maria gathered the scattered bags with practiced efficiency. "Where would you like them?" "Just in the back seat, honey. You're an angel." The woman studied Maria's face with interest. "I don't believe I've seen you in the neighborhood before." "No, ma'am. I'm visiting the Hamiltons." Maria wasn't sure how to explain her situation. "Oh, my. Well, welcome to Magnolia Drive, dear. I'm Mrs. Eleanor Whitfield. I live 3 houses down from Dennis and Lara." Her expression shifted slightly at Lara's name. "And you are?" "Maria Brosas, ma'am." "What a lovely name. Well, Maria, you seem like a kind soul. This neighborhood could use more kindness." Mrs. Whitfield squeezed Maria's hand gently. "If you ever need anything, and I mean anything, you just walk on down to 1253. As Maria walked away, she felt eyes watching her and turned to see a figure in an upstairs window of a grand white mansion. Even from this distance, she could see broad shoulders filling the window frame before the figure stepped back into shadow. But something about the brief glimpse made her heart flutter unexpectedly. The Hamilton estate loomed before her like something from a Southern Gothic novel. White columns supported a wraparound porch, and climbing roses created a romantic canopy over the entrance. It was beautiful, intimidating, and completely foreign to everything she'd ever known. Maria climbed the marble steps and pressed the doorbell, hearing Westminster chimes echo through what must be an enormous interior. Her reflection stared back from the polished brass nameplate, Hamilton. The door opened to reveal a woman of about 50, with warm brown skin and intelligent eyes that seemed to see everything at once. She wore a simple gray dress and an apron, but her posture spoke of quiet dignity. "You must be Miss Maria," the woman said with a slight smile. "I'm Zenara Baptiste, the housekeeper. Mrs. Hamilton is expecting you." Maria followed Zenara through a foyer that could have housed her entire childhood home. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow prisms on cream-colored walls, lined with oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors. "Don't mind them," Zenara whispered conspiratorially, noticing Maria's upward glances. "They're just paint and varnish. It's the living ones you have to watch out for." The drawing room was an exercise in intimidation disguised as elegance. Silk wallpaper, Persian rugs, and furniture that belonged in a museum created an atmosphere where conversation felt like a performance. French doors opened onto a garden that looked like it required a full-time staff to maintain. Lara Edwards Hamilton rose from a velvet settee with the fluid grace of someone born to command attention. She was beautiful in the way magazine covers demanded, blonde hair in a perfect chignon, makeup applied with professional precision, and a smile that never quite reached her ice-blue eyes. Her cream-colored suit probably cost more than Maria's nursing school tuition would have been. Miss Brosas, Lara extended a perfectly manicured hand. How lovely to finally meet you in person. Maria shook the offered hand, noting how cold it felt, despite the warm afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity, Mrs. Hamilton. I won't let you down. I'm certain you won't. Lara's voice carried the refined accent of old Southern money, each word carefully chosen and precisely delivered. Please, sit. We have so much to discuss. Maria perched on the edge of a chair that probably cost more than her family's car, feeling like she might break something just by breathing wrong. Zenara, please bring us some tea, Lara commanded without looking at the housekeeper. The good china. As Zenara departed, Lara turned her full attention to Maria, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. I trust the journey wasn't too taxing. I know public transportation can be challenging. It was fine, ma'am. I brought books. How resourceful. Lara's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Well, let me be direct, Miss Brosas. We've chosen you for very specific reasons. Your medical history is exemplary, your background checks were satisfactory, and most importantly, you understand that this is a business arrangement. Nothing more, nothing less? Maria nodded, though something in Lara's tone made her uncomfortable. You'll be living in the guest house behind the main residence. It's been completely renovated for your comfort. You'll have access to the finest medical care, nutritious meals, and anything else you need for a healthy pregnancy. Lara paused. In return, we expect complete compliance with our agreement. Of course. That means no unnecessary contact with my husband, no interference with our family dynamics, and absolutely no complications. You're here to carry our child safely to term and then return to your life in Georgia. Clean, simple, professional. The way Lara said your life in Georgia made it sound like a communicable disease. Zenara returned with an elaborate tea service, the china so delicate Maria was afraid to touch it. As she poured, the housekeeper's movements were economical and graceful, speaking of years of practice. Thank you, Zenara. That will be all for now. Actually, a male voice interrupted from the doorway, I'd like to meet Miss Brosas as well. Maria looked up to see the man from the upstairs window, and her breath caught completely. Dennis Hamilton was magnificent in every sense of the word. He stood well over 6 feet tall, his muscular frame filling the doorway with commanding presence. His broad shoulders strained against his tailored white dress shirt, and she could see the definition of his chest muscles beneath the fine fabric. His arms, revealed by rolled-up sleeves, were powerfully built. Not bulky like a bodybuilder, but with the lean, defined musculature of someone who took physical fitness seriously. But it wasn't just his impressive physique that stopped her heart. His storm gray eyes held a gentleness that seemed at odds with his imposing physical presence, and his prematurely silver hair gave him a distinguished air that suggested wisdom earned through experience. When he smiled, the expression transformed his ruggedly handsome face completely, revealing the kind man hiding beneath the intimidating exterior. He was handsome in a way that made women stop and stare on the street, certainly, but it was the unexpected kindness in his expression that made Maria's heart skip. This was not a man who used his impressive build to intimidate. Instead, he carried himself with the careful control of someone aware of his own strength. Dennis, Lara's voice carried a warning, we were just finishing up. I'm sure Miss Brosas would appreciate meeting both of her employers, Dennis said mildly, but Maria caught the steel beneath his polite tone. His deep voice resonated with quiet authority. After all, we're asking her to do something incredibly generous for our family. He crossed the room with an easy stride that spoke of athletic grace, and Maria noticed how his powerful thighs moved beneath his tailored slacks. When he extended his hand to her, she rose to meet him and was struck by how his muscular frame towered over her petite form. His hand, when she took it, was large enough to completely engulf hers, calloused from what must be regular exercise, warm and strong. When their fingers touched, she felt an electric shock of connection that had nothing to do with static electricity and everything to do with recognition. The sheer masculine presence of him, all controlled strength and gentle power, made her feel protected and desired in equal measure. "Thank you," Dennis said simply, holding her gaze with those incredible gray eyes. "What you're doing for us, for Lara and me, means more than you can know." Maria found herself unable to speak for a moment, drowning in eyes that seemed to see straight through to her heart, while being intensely aware of the way his muscular chest rose and fell with each breath, how his rolled sleeves revealed forearms corded with lean muscle. "You're welcome, Mr. Hamilton. Please call me Dennis. We're going to be family, in a way." His voice, deep and resonant, seemed to vibrate through her entire body. "Dennis," Lara's voice could have frozen boiling water. "I'm sure Miss Brozas is tired from her journey." The spell broke, and Maria stepped back, her cheeks burning with awareness of how this powerfully built man affected her. "Yes, I should probably get settled." "Of course." Dennis seemed reluctant to end the conversation, but he stepped aside as Lara rose with fluid efficiency. Even in movement, Maria couldn't help but notice the way his muscular frame moved with controlled grace. "Zenara will show you to the guest house and help you get oriented. Dinner is at 7, but tonight you'll eat in your quarters. Tomorrow we'll discuss the household schedule." As Zenara led her through the main house toward the back garden, Maria caught a glimpse of a young boy peering around a corner. He had Dennis's gentle eyes and the promise of his father's impressive build, though softened by childhood innocence. "That's Master Peter," Zenara murmured. 7 years old and sweet as pie, but lonely as a cloud." The guest house was a small miracle of renovation, all exposed beams and modern amenities, disguised as rustic charm. A stone fireplace dominated the living area, and French doors opened onto a private garden space where someone had planted herbs and vegetables. "Mrs. Hamilton had this done special for you," Zenara explained, setting down Maria's suitcase. "Though I suspect Mr. Dennis had more to do with the garden than she did. Man's got hands made for growing things, despite all that muscle." Maria ran her fingers over the lavender plants, breathing in their calming scent while thinking about Dennis's large, capable hands tending these delicate plants. "It's beautiful. He's a good man," Zenara said quietly. "Better than he knows and better than he's been allowed to be. Don't let all that size fool you. He's gentle as a lamb with things that matter." That evening, as Maria unpacked her few belongings in the most luxurious space she'd ever inhabited, she found herself wondering about the undercurrents she'd sensed. Lara's cold perfection, Dennis's surprising gentleness wrapped in such an imposing physical package, the lonely little boy, and Zenara's cryptic comments all suggested a family held together by something other than love. She stood at her bedroom window, looking across the garden toward the main house, and saw Dennis in what must be his study. Even seated, his broad shoulders and muscular frame were unmistakable. He was staring out his own window, seemingly lost in thought. When he noticed her silhouette, he raised his hand in a brief wave, and even that simple gesture spoke of controlled strength, before stepping back into shadow. Maria touched her still flat belly and whispered, "What have we gotten ourselves into, little one?" In the main house, Dennis Hamilton stood in his study, his powerful frame silhouetted against the window, staring at the surrogacy contract that was supposed to save his marriage. But all he could think about was warm brown eyes, and a smile that had made him feel more alive in 5 minutes than he had in 5 years of marriage, despite his impressive physical presence that usually intimidated rather than attracted. Chapter 2. Quiet Revolutions. 3 weeks in paradise, and Maria had learned that even Eden had its serpents, and sometimes its guardian angels came disguised as powerfully built CEOs who forgot to breathe when they watched her tend the garden. She knelt in the herb garden behind the guest house, her hands deep in rich soil that smelled of possibility and new beginnings, humming Blessed Assurance the way her grandmother had taught her on those long Georgia afternoons when the world seemed full of promise despite their poverty. The morning sun painted everything gold, and the scent of rosemary and thyme reminded her of home in ways that made her heart ache with both longing and gratitude. The pregnancy test had confirmed what she'd suspected 2 days ago. New life was growing inside her, and with it, a complexity she hadn't anticipated when she'd signed that contract. From his study window in the main house, Dennis Hamilton had developed an unfortunate habit that was becoming impossible to justify. Every morning at precisely 8:15, his muscular frame could be found positioned near the window that overlooked the guest house garden, drawn there by forces he didn't want to examine too closely. He told himself it was concern for the pregnancy, responsible employer behavior. But the truth sat heavier on his conscience than the weights he lifted each morning in his private gym. Maria Brosas had become the brightest part of his carefully structured days. This morning was no different. She wore a simple yellow sundress that caught the morning breeze, and her voice carried across the space between them like a hymn that made his powerful chest tight with emotions he'd thought were buried with his first wife. Dennis braced his muscular forearms against the window frame, watching her hands move through the plants with loving care, wondering when he'd stopped believing in tenderness. "The quarterly reports won't review themselves," Piers Thorne's voice interrupted from behind him. Dennis turned to find his best friend and business partner standing in the doorway, coffee in hand and knowing expression firmly in place. Piers had the unfortunate habit of seeing through Dennis's carefully constructed facades with uncomfortable precision. "Just checking on the garden," Dennis said, his deep voice carefully controlled as he moved away from the window. Even that simple movement showcased the fluid power in his impressive physique. "Mm-hmm. The garden, not the gardener. Don't be ridiculous." Piers settled into the leather chair across from Dennis's massive oak desk, his expression growing serious as he studied his friend's imposing frame. "Dennis, I've known you for 15 years. I've never seen you give a damn about horticulture before." "Things change. People develop new interests." "Yes, they do. That's exactly what worries me." Piers leaned forward. "Look, I understand she's attractive, and God knows your marriage hasn't been warm. But this is dangerous territory." Dennis picked up a pen with hands that could crush it without effort, then set it down again, unable to concentrate on anything except the melody drifting through his window. "She's carrying my child, Piers. Of course I'm concerned about her welfare." "Your child. Laura's child. The child that's supposed to fix whatever's broken between you two." "Nothing's broken between Laura and me that wasn't broken from the beginning." The admission hung in the air like smoke, and Dennis immediately regretted the honesty. Piers studied his friend's face with the intensity that had made him a formidable negotiator. "Then why are you doing this? The surrogacy, I mean." Dennis was saved from answering by a knock on the study door. Zenara entered with her usual quiet efficiency, carrying a silver tray laden with correspondence. "Your mail, Mr. Dennis, and Mrs. Hamilton asked me to remind you about the charity luncheon this afternoon." After Zenara left, Dennis returned to the window, his broad shoulders filling the frame. Maria was no longer in the garden, but he could see her through the guest house kitchen window, arranging the herbs she'd cut in a small vase. The simple domestic scene stirred something in his chest that he thought was dead. Meanwhile, in the main house's opulent master suite, Laura Edwards Hamilton was conducting her own form of surveillance. She stood at her dressing room window, positioned to observe both the guest house and Dennis's study window. What she saw confirmed her growing suspicions and hardened her resolve. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she'd memorized but never saved. Lorien Blackwell Investigations. Ms. Blackwell, this is Lara Hamilton. I need you to conduct a more thorough background check on Maria Brosas. Everything: family history, financial records, past relationships, medical history beyond what the clinic provided. Mrs. Hamilton, we already conducted a comprehensive investigation. Not comprehensive enough. I want to know what she ate for breakfast on her 16th birthday. I want to know every man she's ever looked at twice. And I want it done quietly. Of course. May I ask what's prompted this additional investigation? Laura watched Dennis's silhouette in his study window, noting how his powerful frame seemed transfixed by whatever held his attention in the garden below. Call it insurance. How quickly can you have results? Give me a week. You have 3 days. After ending the call, Laura selected her outfit for the charity luncheon with military precision. The Coastal Children's Hospital fundraiser would be crawling with Charleston's social elite, all of whom would be fascinated to learn about the Hamilton family's unconventional approach to expanding their household. In the guest house, Maria was experiencing her first real bout of morning sickness. She barely made it to the bathroom before her breakfast made an unwelcome reappearance. As she splashed cool water on her face, she caught sight of herself in the mirror, pale, slightly green around the edges, but undeniably glowing with the first bloom of pregnancy. A soft knock on the door interrupted her recovery. "Miss Maria." "It's Peter." Maria opened the door to find the Hamilton boy standing on her doorstep, clutching a book and looking uncertain. Up close, she could see he had his father's gentle gray eyes and the promise of his father's impressive build, though softened by childhood innocence. "Hello, Peter. What brings you by this morning?" "Mama said I wasn't supposed to bother you, but I thought, I wondered if you might like to see my book about gardens." Maria's heart melted at the hopeful uncertainty in his voice. "I would absolutely love to see your book. Please, come in." Peter entered shyly, taking in the cozy interior of the guest house with obvious appreciation. "It's nice in here. It feels warm and safe." "Thank you, sweetheart. Would you like some juice? I was just about to make some." "Yes, please." Mama doesn't usually let me have juice because she says it has too much sugar. As Maria poured apple juice into 2 glasses, Peter settled at the small kitchen table and opened his book with reverent care. It was a children's guide to vegetable gardening, well worn from repeated reading. "My real mama gave this to me before she went to heaven," Peter said quietly. "She said gardens are places where love grows, and that even when she couldn't be with me anymore, I could remember her by planting things." Maria sat beside him, her throat tight with emotion. "She sounds like a very wise woman who loved you very much." "I don't remember her face very clearly anymore, which makes me sad sometimes. But I remember little bits, like how she smelled like vanilla when she was baking, and how she sang to me when I had bad dreams." Peter looked up at Maria with eyes too old for his face. "Do you think she can see the garden from heaven?" "I think she can see everything that makes you happy, sweetheart, and I think she's very proud of the kind boy you're becoming." They spent the next hour looking through the book together, Peter explaining the difference between annuals and perennials with earnest intensity. Maria found herself enchanted by his gentle intelligence and obvious hunger for connection. "Peter Hamilton, what are you doing here?" They both looked up to find Lara standing in the doorway, her face a mask of controlled fury. She wore a pristine white suit that made her look like an ice sculpture, beautiful and untouchable. I was just showing Miss Maria my garden book, Mama. I specifically told you not to disturb our guest. She has important work to do. It's no trouble at all, Mrs. Hamilton, Maria said quickly. Peter was just sharing his knowledge about gardening. Peter has his own responsibilities, piano practice, tutoring, and preparation for his French lesson. Lara's voice could have frosted windows. We can't have him falling behind in his studies. Peter's face fell, but he closed his book obediently. Yes, Mama. Say goodbye to Miss Broses, Peter. You won't be visiting again without explicit permission. After Peter left with dragging steps, Lara turned her attention to Maria with laser focus. Miss Broses, I thought I was clear about boundaries. Peter is not your concern. He's just a lonely little boy who wanted to share his book. He's my son, and I'll decide what he needs. Lara stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. You're here for one purpose. Don't confuse that with being part of this family. I understand my role here. Do you? Because from where I stand, it looks like you're already making yourself quite comfortable. Morning chats with the neighbors, gardening tutorials with my husband watching from his window, and now corrupting my son with your maternal instincts. Maria felt heat rise in her cheeks. I'm not trying to corrupt anyone. Good, because that would be a mistake you couldn't afford to make. Lara smiled, but it was the expression of a predator sizing up prey. Remember, Miss Broses, you're a guest here. Guests can be asked to leave at any time. After Lara departed, Maria sank into her chair, shaking slightly. The threat had been delivered with Southern lady politeness, but the message was crystal clear. Step out of line, and she'd find herself on the next bus back to Georgia. That evening, Dennis found himself walking the grounds, ostensibly checking the security system, but actually hoping for a glimpse of Maria. He found her on the guest house porch, reading by the soft glow of a table lamp. Good evening, he called softly, not wanting to startle her. Maria looked up, and even in the dim light he could see she'd been crying. Oh, hello, Dennis. May I ask if everything's all right? You seem upset. Maria hesitated, clearly debating whether to confide in him. It's nothing, just adjusting to everything. Dennis approached the porch steps but didn't climb them, sensing she needed space. His imposing frame cast a protective shadow in the evening light. It must be difficult, being away from everything familiar. It is, but I knew that coming in. Maria closed her book. Your son is wonderful, by the way, so bright and sweet. Dennis's expression softened, his muscular frame relaxing slightly. He is, though I worry he's too sensitive for his own good sometimes. There's nothing wrong with sensitivity. The world needs more gentle hearts. They stood in comfortable silence, the evening air heavy with jasmine and unspoken possibilities. Maria, Dennis said quietly, his deep voice carrying across the space between them. If you ever need anything, anything at all, please don't hesitate to ask. Thank you. That means more than you know. As Dennis walked back to the main house, his powerful stride carrying him through the gathering darkness, he could feel Maria watching him go. Neither of them noticed Lara observing from her bedroom window, her expression calculating and cold. The battle lines were being drawn, and she intended to win at any cost. Chapter 3. Cracks in the Foundation. The first thunderstorm of spring arrived like an angry god, splitting the Charleston sky with silver fire and shaking the very foundations of the Hamilton estate. Maria pressed herself against the guest house window, watching sheets of rain assault the garden she'd grown to love. Back home in Georgia, storms meant tornadoes, destruction, families huddled in basements praying for dawn. The rational part of her mind knew she was safe here, but her body remembered childhood terror and trembled accordingly. Lightning illuminated the garden in stark black and white, and in that brief moment she saw Dennis running across the lawn toward her cottage, his powerful frame cutting through the rain, his white shirt plastered to his muscular chest, his face etched with concern. "Maria!" His voice carried over the thunder as he pounded on her door. "Are you all right?" She threw open the door and he stumbled inside, dripping and breathless. The soaked shirt clung to every defined muscle of his torso, and Maria had to force herself to focus on his worried eyes instead of the impressive display of masculine strength before her. "I saw your lights flickering and thought, are you afraid of storms?" "Terrified," she admitted, wrapping her arms around herself. "Back home, storms like this usually mean trouble." Dennis looked around the small living space, taking in her pale face and shaking hands. Without hesitation, he shrugged out of his soaked shirt, revealing the powerful muscles of his chest and shoulders, then draped his suit jacket around her shoulders. The gesture was so natural, so protective, that Maria felt something deep in her chest shift and settle. "It's just rain," he said gently, leading her to the sofa. "Charleston storms are loud but rarely dangerous." "May I?" At her nod, he sat beside her, close enough that she could smell his cologne mixed with rain and something uniquely him. When thunder crashed overhead, she instinctively moved closer, and his arm came around her shoulders as naturally as breathing. "Tell me about Georgia," Dennis said, his voice low and soothing. "What was your childhood like?" "Poor but happy," Maria said, relaxing into the warmth of his embrace. "My grandmother raised me after my parents died in a car accident. She had this little farm, nothing fancy, just enough to keep us fed. She taught me that everything grows better with love and attention." "She sounds wonderful." She was. Used to say that storms were just God's way of watering the earth, but she never saw an F3 tornado tear through the next county. Maria's voice caught. "I was 12 when that happened. 23 people died, including a whole family I knew from church." Dennis's arm tightened around her. "I'm sorry. No wonder storms frighten you." They sat in comfortable silence as the storm raged outside. Maria became aware of how right this felt, his solid presence beside her, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the way her fear ebbed away in his arms. It was dangerous, she knew. This was her employer, a married man, the father of the child she carried. But in this moment, with thunder shaking the windows and rain drumming on the roof, he was simply Dennis, the man who'd run through a storm to make sure she was safe. "What about your dreams?" Dennis asked quietly. "Before all this, what did you want to do with your life?" "Nursing school," Maria said without hesitation. "I always wanted to help people heal. My grandmother used to joke that I'd bandage a broken butterfly wing if I found one." "What stopped you?" "Money. Life. When Grandmama got sick, I had to take care of her. After she passed, there were debts." Maria trailed off, realizing she was sharing more than she'd intended. "This opportunity, it means I can finally afford school. Give something back." Dennis was quiet for so long that Maria wondered if she'd said too much. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "Lara's never wanted to help anyone but herself." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Maria knew she should change the subject, step away from this intimate moment, but the storm outside seemed to have suspended normal rules. "Tell me about Peter's mother," she said instead. Dennis's hand, which had been tracing gentle patterns on her shoulder, stilled. "Sarah was luminous. She lit up every room she entered. We were young, maybe too young, but she made me believe in magic." "How did she die?" "Cancer. Ovarian. She was so young, only 25. Peter was barely 2 inches. Dennis's voice cracked. "She made me promise to remarry, to give Peter a mother. Said she couldn't bear the thought of him growing up alone." "So you married Lara." 18 months later. Lara is beautiful, well-connected. Everything Sarah thought Peter needed in a stepmother. What I didn't realize was that wanting to be a mother and knowing how to love a child are two very different things. Another crash of thunder, but Maria barely noticed. She was lost in the pain in Dennis's voice, the weight of choices made from grief rather than love. "Do you ever regret it?" Dennis looked down at her, and in the dim light of the cottage, his eyes were storm gray and infinitely sad. "Every single day." The admission fell between them like a confession, changing everything. Maria knew she should move away, create distance, remind them both of the boundaries they were crossing. Instead, she found herself reaching up to touch his face, her thumb tracing the line of his jaw. "Dennis, I know," he whispered. "I know this is impossible. I know you're here for Lara, for the baby, for all the wrong reasons. But Maria, I haven't felt alive in years. And then you walked into my house, and suddenly I remember what it means to breathe." Their faces were inches apart now, the storm outside forgotten. Maria could see gold flecks in his gray eyes, could count the lines that spoke of too many years carrying burdens alone. "This is dangerous," she whispered. "I know. If Lara finds out, I know." But neither of them moved away. The moment stretched between them, taut with possibility and fraught with consequence. Outside, the storm was beginning to ease, but inside the cottage, another kind of tempest was gathering. When Dennis finally kissed her, it was soft and tentative, a question rather than a demand. Maria's response was answer enough, her lips parting under his, her hand sliding into his still damp hair, her body melting into his embrace as if she'd been waiting her whole life for this moment. The kiss deepened, became something desperate and necessary. Dennis tasted like promises and broken dreams, like everything Maria had never known she wanted. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I should go," Dennis said, but made no move to leave. "Yes, you should." Neither moved. The cottage felt like a world apart from everything else. The main house, Lara, the complicated reality of their situation. Here, in this small space filled with the sound of gentle rain, they were just a man and a woman discovering something beautiful and terrifying. "Maria, I need you to know." She pressed her fingers to his lips, silencing him. Don't make promises we can't keep or apologize for something that felt so right." Dennis caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "What happens now? I don't know. But I know I'm not sorry. Neither am I." The storm had passed, leaving the world outside clean and new. Dennis stood reluctantly, gathering his damp shirt from where he'd dropped it. "Will you be all right alone?" Maria smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her since she'd arrived. "I'm not alone anymore, am I?" He kissed her once more, soft and lingering, before stepping out into the cool night air. Maria watched from her window as he walked back to the main house, his shoulders straight despite the weight he carried. Neither of them noticed the figure watching from the main house kitchen window. Zenara had seen Dennis run to the cottage, had witnessed his extended absence, and now watched his reluctant return. Her weathered face showed no surprise, only a deep sadness for the complications she knew were coming. In the master bedroom, Lara lay awake, listening to Dennis's quiet footsteps in the hallway. She'd noted his absence during the storm, had drawn her own conclusions about where he'd gone. When he finally slipped into bed beside her, she could smell another woman's soap on his skin. "Rough storm," she said quietly. "Yes, I checked on the grounds. A few branches down, but no real damage. Good. We wouldn't want anything damaged." Dennis stiffened beside her, hearing the threat in her words. In the darkness, Lara smiled. The game had begun, and she intended to win. In the cottage, Maria touched her lips where Dennis had kissed her and felt her carefully constructed walls crumbling. She was falling in love with a man she couldn't have, carrying his child for a woman who hated her, living in a house where every emotion was a potential weapon. The storm had passed, but Maria knew it was only the first of many to come. Chapter 4. The art of falling love, Maria discovered, was a thief in the night, stealing into her heart one stolen glance at a time, one shared smile, one conversation that lasted until dawn painted the sky pink over Charleston Harbor. 2 weeks had passed since the storm, and the dance between her and Dennis had become an exquisite form of torture. They moved around each other like planets in careful orbit, close enough to feel the gravitational pull, far enough apart to maintain the illusion of propriety. But the illusion was wearing thin. This morning found Maria in the garden, her hands deep in the soil, tending to the tomato plants that had become Dennis's excuse to visit the cottage daily. She felt him before she saw him, that subtle shift in the air that announced his presence. "The beefsteaks are coming along nicely," Dennis said, settling beside her on the garden bench he'd installed 3 days ago, ostensibly for her comfort during pregnancy. Really, Maria suspected, for these moments when they could sit together without the weight of watching eyes. "They'll be beautiful by August," Maria agreed, not looking at him directly. Looking at Dennis had become dangerous. His storm-gray eyes had a way of making her forget every reason why this was impossible. "August feels like a lifetime from now." The words carried weight beyond their surface meaning. August was when the baby would arrive, when Maria's time in Charleston would end, when she'd return to Georgia and this interlude would become just a memory. "Sometimes lifetimes can fit into a few months," Maria said quietly. Dennis reached over and brushed a smudge of soil from her cheek, his large, powerful hand surprisingly gentle against her skin, his touch sending electricity through her entire body. Even this simple gesture showcased the controlled strength in his muscular frame. "Maria, I know," she whispered. "I know we shouldn't. I know this is complicated and dangerous and probably wrong. But Dennis, I can't seem to stop myself from falling in love with me." The words hung in the morning air like a benediction and a curse. Maria's breath caught because there it was, the truth neither of them had dared speak aloud. "Yes," she admitted, her voice barely audible. Dennis's hand cupped her face, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone with the same careful control he used to manage his imposing physical presence. "I fell in love with you the moment you helped Mrs. Whitfield with her groceries. Watching you choose kindness over convenience, I knew you were everything I'd been missing." "This is impossible, Dennis. You're married. I'm carrying your wife's child. There's no happy ending here." "Maybe not. But maybe some things are worth loving even if we can't keep them." Before Maria could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps made them spring apart. Fair Hamilton emerged from the garden path, her designer heels clicking against the stone walkway. Dennis's sister was elegant in the way Southern women perfected, all flowing scarves and understated jewelry, with intelligence sparkling in her green eyes. "Good morning, you two," Farah said with a knowing smile. "Don't mind me, I'm just here to steal Maria for a girl's day out." "Fair," Dennis warned, "that's not necessary." "Oh, but it is. Our Maria has been cooped up in this beautiful prison for weeks. She needs fresh air, good food, and the company of someone who isn't walking around with their heart on their sleeve." Maria felt heat rush to her cheeks. "Is it that obvious?" "Darling, a blind woman could see the way you two orbit each other. It's actually quite beautiful, if it weren't so utterly doomed." Dennis stood abruptly. "Farah, this isn't a game." "No, it's not. It's life, Dennis. Messy, complicated, beautiful life. And for the first time in years, you're actually living it instead of just enduring it." Fair turned to Maria with surprising gentleness. "What do you say? Shall we scandalize the good people of Charleston with your obvious pregnancy and my shocking disregard for my sister-in-law's rules?" Maria looked at Dennis, seeing something in his eyes that might have been relief. I think I'd like that very much. 2 hours later, Maria found herself at a sidewalk cafe in Charleston's historic district, surrounded by the chatter of tourists and the scent of she-crab soup. Fair had chosen a table tucked away from foot traffic, where they could speak freely without fear of social eavesdropping. So, Fair said, spearing a piece of shrimp with surgical precision, tell me how my brother is driving you slowly insane with his noble suffering. Maria nearly choked on her sweet tea. Excuse me? Oh, please. Dennis has been perfecting the art of tragic martyrdom since he was 12. Always carrying the weight of the world, always doing what's expected rather than what he wants. It's exhausting to watch and probably worse to fall in love with. I don't know what you mean. Fair laughed, a sound like silver bells. Honey, I've known Dennis since he was in diapers. I watched him marry Sarah because he loved her, and I watched him marry Lara because he thought he should. The difference is written all over his face when he looks at you. Maria set down her fork, her appetite suddenly gone. This is impossible, Fair. Even if Dennis and I, even if we wanted to try, there's Lara, there's Peter, there's the baby. There's also the fact that my brother's marriage has been dead for 3 years, and everyone knows it except Dennis. The words hit Maria like a physical blow. What do you mean? Fair leaned forward, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper. Lara has been having an affair with Marsden Cross for 2 years. Half of Charleston society knows about it. The only reason she hasn't divorced Dennis is because she'd lose her social position and most of the money. Maria's mind reeled. But then why does she want this baby so badly? Because a baby ties Dennis to her forever, makes divorce messier, more expensive, more socially complicated. The perfect insurance policy. Does Dennis know? Dennis sees what he chooses to see. He's convinced himself that if he just tries hard enough, sacrifices enough, he can make his marriage work. It's been painful to watch. Maria pushed back from the table, suddenly needing air. I think I need to walk. They strolled through the historic district, past antebellum mansions and ancient churches, while Fair painted a picture of a marriage built on convenience rather than love. Maria learned about Dennis's first wife, Sarah, who had been Fair's best friend. About how Dennis had nearly died of grief when Sarah passed, how he'd thrown himself into work and duty rather than healing. When he met Lara, she represented everything Sarah had asked him to find: stability, social position, a mother for Peter. What he didn't understand was that Sarah wanted him to find love again, not just function. Peter doesn't seem close to Lara, because Lara sees Peter as an obligation, not a gift. She provides for his physical needs and ignores his emotional ones completely. It breaks my heart. They paused at a small park overlooking the harbor, watching sailboats navigate the afternoon currents. Maria placed her hand on her growing belly, feeling the first flutters of movement. The baby just moved, she said wonderingly. Fair's eyes filled with tears. Oh, honey, that must be so bittersweet. It is. I love this child already, but I know I'll have to give her up. Her, Maria smiled. Just a feeling. Dennis thinks it's a boy, but I think she's definitely a little girl. Strong-willed, if the way she's been making me sick is any indication. Have you told Dennis how you feel? About him, I mean. This morning, in the garden, right before you arrived, actually. Fair squeezed Maria's hand, and he said he's fallen in love with me too. But Fair, what kind of future could we possibly have? I'm nobody from nowhere carrying another woman's child. Even if Dennis left Lara, which he won't, I'd never fit into his world. You're wrong about that. You'd fit perfectly into Dennis's world because you'd make it better. You make him better. Fair turned to face Maria fully. Can I tell you something about my brother? Maria nodded. Dennis has spent his entire adult life doing what other people needed him to do. Be the perfect son, the grieving widower, the devoted stepfather, the successful businessman. The only time I've seen him choose what he wanted was when he married Sarah, and that was the happiest I've ever seen him. Until now? Until now. These past few weeks, watching him with you, I've seen glimpses of the man he used to be, the man he could be again if he had the courage to reach for what he really wants. They made their way back to the cafe, where Fair insisted on ordering dessert, bread pudding with bourbon sauce that made Maria close her eyes in bliss. I have a confession, Fair said as they shared the dessert. I didn't bring you out today just for fun. I wanted to warn you. Maria's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. About what? Laura's been asking questions about your background, your family, your reasons for becoming a surrogate. She's hired a private investigator. Fear shot through Maria's chest. What kind of questions? Everything. But Maria, here's the thing. There's nothing in your past to be ashamed of. You're exactly who you appear to be. A good woman trying to do right by everyone around her. Laura's looking for ammunition that doesn't exist. What should I do? Be yourself. Love my brother if you can't help it, but be prepared for the battle that's coming. Because Laura won't go quietly, and she'll use any weapon she can find. As they drove back to the Hamilton estate, Maria felt the weight of impossible choices settling around her shoulders. She was in love with a married man, carrying his child for a woman who was determined to destroy her, and falling deeper into a situation that had no good ending. But when they pulled into the circular drive and she saw Dennis waiting on the front steps, his face lighting up at the sight of her, Maria knew it was already too late for regrets. She was in love, completely and hopelessly, and whatever came next would have to be faced with that truth as her foundation. Remember, Farah whispered as they got out of the car, some things are worth fighting for, even if the odds are against you. Maria nodded, watching Dennis approach with that careful stride that told her he was holding himself back from running to her. When he smiled, her heart did that little flip that had become as familiar as breathing. Did you have a good time? Dennis asked, his eyes searching her face. Yes, Maria said simply. I learned quite a lot. The look that passed between them was full of promise and possibility, the kind of look that said nothing had been decided, but everything had changed. In the distance, Maria caught a glimpse of Laura watching from an upstairs window, her face a mask of cold calculation. The battle lines were drawn, and Maria was finally ready to fight. Chapter 5. When worlds collide, hell, Maria learned, could be dressed in designer clothes and served on bone china. Laura's voice echoed through the Hamilton mansion like breaking glass, each word sharp enough to draw blood. Don't you dare lie to me, Dennis. I saw you with her yesterday in the garden, looking at her like she was the second coming. Maria pressed herself against the guest house window, her heart hammering as she watched the scene unfold through the main house's French doors. She shouldn't be watching, shouldn't be eavesdropping, but she couldn't look away from the destruction of a marriage that had apparently been held together with nothing but social expectation and mutual deception. Laura, please lower your voice. Peter. Peter what? Peter might hear the truth about his precious father, that you're sneaking around with a hired help like some common— Enough! Dennis's voice cut through Lara's venom with surprising force. Maria is not hired help. She's carrying our child, and she deserves your respect, if not your gratitude. Our child? Lara's laugh was bitter as winter wind. Whose child, Dennis? Because lately I'm not so sure. The accusation hung in the air like poison, and Maria felt her blood turn to ice. Through the window, she saw Dennis step back as if he'd been slapped. What exactly are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that your little saint isn't as pure as she pretends. I'm suggesting that maybe this pregnancy is more convenient than miraculous." Maria's hand flew to her rounded belly, protective and fierce. The baby inside her shifted as if sensing her distress, and she fought the urge to storm into that house and defend herself. Instead, she sank onto her sofa and tried to steady her breathing. The sound of a door slamming made her jump, and moments later Dennis appeared on her doorstep, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. "She knows," he said without preamble, "about us, about how I feel." Maria opened the door wider, letting him into the sanctuary of the guest house. "I heard some of it. Dennis, what she said about the baby is impossible, and we both know it." Dennis pulled her into his arms, holding her against his chest as if he could shield her from Laura's accusations. "The timeline doesn't work, and besides, I know you. You're not capable of that kind of deception. But other people might believe it. If she starts spreading rumors, then we'll deal with it. Together." The word "together" hung between them, heavy with implication. Maria pulled back to look at his face, seeing determination warring with the weight of impossible circumstances. "Dennis, what are you saying?" Before he could answer, another voice interrupted from the doorway. "Daddy? Miss Maria?" They turned to find Peter standing on the threshold, his small face streaked with tears and his school uniform wrinkled as if he'd been running. In his arms he clutched the garden book Maria had seen weeks ago. "Peter, sweetheart, what's wrong?" Maria knelt to his level, her heart breaking at the confusion in his eyes. "Mama was yelling and saying bad things about you and Daddy, and I got scared. She said you might have to go away, and I don't want you to go away." Peter's voice broke on the last words, and he threw himself into Maria's arms with the desperate intensity of a child who'd lost too much already. Maria held him close, breathing in his little boy scent of grass stains and innocence. "Oh, honey, please don't leave," Peter whispered against her shoulder. "I know you're not really my mama, but you feel like my mama, and the baby needs you too." Over Peter's head, Maria met Dennis's eyes and saw her own heartbreak reflected there. This beautiful, sensitive child had somehow become the center of everything, the reason for the surrogacy, the innocent victim of adult complications, the bridge between the life Dennis had and the life he wanted. "Peter," Dennis said gently, "come here, son." Peter went to his father but kept one hand on Maria's arm, as if afraid she might disappear. Dennis knelt beside them both, creating a small circle of connection in the middle of chaos. "Son, sometimes grown-ups have disagreements. That doesn't mean anyone is going anywhere. But Mama said..." Whatever Mama said, she was upset and scared. People say things they don't mean when they're scared. Peter looked between his father and Maria, with eyes too old for his face. "Are you and Miss Maria in love?" The directness of the question took them both by surprise. Dennis looked at Maria, and she saw him make a decision that would change everything. "Yes," Dennis said simply. "I love Maria very much." "And I love your daddy," Maria added, because the truth was out now and there was no point in pretending otherwise. Peter nodded as if this made perfect sense. "That's good. Love makes families better. My real mama told me that before she went to heaven." "She was right," Maria whispered, tears blurring her vision. They sat there for a moment, the three of them forming something that felt like family despite all the reasons it shouldn't work. Then the spell was broken by the sound of approaching footsteps. Lara appeared in the doorway like an avenging angel, her perfect composure cracked just enough to show the fury underneath. "Peter Hamilton, get away from that woman this instant." "Lara!" Dennis started to rise, but Lara cut him off with a gesture. "Number, I've tolerated this long enough. Peter, come here, now." Peter shrank against Maria, and she felt his small body trembling. "It's okay, sweetheart," she whispered. "Go to your mother." "She's not my mother," Peter said, his voice small but defiant. "My mother loved me." The words hit Lara like a physical blow. Her face went white, then red, then settled into something cold and terrible. "You," she said, pointing at Maria, "have corrupted my son against me. You've turned my husband into an adulterer and my child into a stranger. Well, congratulations. I hope you're happy with the destruction you've caused." "Lara, stop!" Dennis stood, placing himself between his wife and Maria. "This isn't Maria's fault, isn't it? She comes into our home, our lives, carrying our child, and suddenly my marriage is falling apart and my son prefers a stranger to his own mother. If that's not manipulation, I don't know what is." "Maybe," Dennis said quietly. "The problem isn't that Maria came into our lives. Maybe the problem is that she showed us what was missing from them." The silence that followed was deafening. Peter pressed closer to Maria, who wrapped her arms around him protectively. Lara stared at her husband as if she'd never seen him before. "Fine," Lara said finally, her voice deadly calm. "If that's how you want to play this, Dennis, then let's play. But understand, I will not be humiliated. I will not be discarded for some small-town nobody who spreads her legs for money." "Lara." "Peter, go to your room, now." "But now." Peter scrambled to obey, but not before whispering to Maria, "I'll pray for you." After Peter disappeared, Lara turned her attention back to Maria with laser focus. "You want my husband? You think love conquers all? Let me tell you what love conquers, sweetheart. Love conquers nothing. Money conquers. Position conquers. Power conquers. And I have all three." "This isn't about conquering anyone," Maria said, finding her voice at last. "This is about people trying to find happiness." "Happiness?" Lara's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "How naive. Dennis, tell your little princess about happiness. Tell her about the prenups, the trusts, the businesses that will disappear if you divorce me. Tell her about the custody battle that will destroy Peter, the social ostracism that will follow you both. Tell her about the reporters who will make her life hell once this story breaks." Maria felt the blood drain from her face, but she held her ground. "If you think those things scare me, they should, because I'm just getting started." Lara smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression Maria had ever seen. "By the time I'm finished, you'll wish you'd never heard the name Hamilton." With that, Lara swept from the cottage, leaving Dennis and Maria alone with the wreckage of everything they'd carefully built. "She means it," Dennis said heavily. "Lara doesn't make idle threats." "I know." Maria sank onto the sofa, one hand on her belly. "Dennis, maybe I should go, before this gets worse." "No." Dennis sat beside her, taking her hands in his. "Running won't solve anything. Lara will still be angry, Peter will still be hurt, and the baby will still need both of us." "Both of us." Dennis looked into her eyes, and Maria saw something there she'd never seen before. Resolution. "I'm going to divorce her, Maria. I should have done it years ago. This pregnancy, meeting you, watching Peter light up around you, it's shown me what I've been settling for. And if she destroys you in the process, then we'll rebuild, together, if you'll have me." Maria thought about everything Lara had threatened, all the ways this could go wrong, all the reasons it was impossible. Then she thought about Peter's tears, Dennis's gentle hands, the baby growing inside her who deserved to be born into love instead of obligation. "Yes," she whispered. "Whatever comes next, yes." Outside, storm clouds were gathering over Charleston Harbor, and Maria wondered if some storms were meant to wash away the old world so a new one could grow in its place. Chapter 6. The Gathering Storm. The call came at 3 in the morning, shattering the uneasy peace that had settled over the Hamilton estate like morning fog over the harbor. Maria woke to Dennis pounding on her door, his face pale with panic in the porch light. "It's the baby," he said before she could ask. "You're bleeding." She looked down and saw the dark stains on her nightgown, felt the cramping pain that had been building in her sleep. Terror shot through her like electricity as Dennis scooped her into his arms and carried her to his car, not caring who might see, not thinking about anything except getting her to the hospital before they lost the precious life growing inside her. "It's going to be okay," Dennis murmured as he drove through empty Charleston streets, one hand on the wheel, the other holding hers. "Dr. Relo Hayes is meeting us at the hospital. Everything's going to be fine." But Maria could hear the fear underneath his reassurances, could see it in the white-knuckled grip he had on the steering wheel. At 24 weeks, the baby was viable but fragile, and they both knew that stress could trigger complications that modern medicine couldn't always fix. The emergency room at Charleston Memorial was a blur of bright lights and urgent voices. Dr. Rilo Hayes appeared beside Maria's gurney like a guardian angel, his calm competence a steadying force in the chaos. "Mrs. Broses, I need you to try to relax. We're going to take good care of both of you." "The baby." Maria tried to sit up, but gentle hands pressed her back down. "The baby's heartbeat is strong. Let's run some tests and see what we're dealing with." The next hour passed in a haze of ultrasounds and blood work, of Dennis holding her hand while medical professionals spoke in hushed tones just outside her hearing. Maria stared at the ceiling tiles and tried not to think about what losing this baby would mean. Not just to Dennis and Lara's marriage, but to her own heart, which had somehow claimed this child as completely as if she'd planned to keep her from the beginning. Finally, Dr. Hayes returned with results that were both reassuring and troubling. The good news is that baby is fine, strong heartbeat, normal movement, no signs of distress. The bleeding was caused by placental irritation, which can happen with stress. "Stress," Dennis repeated, his voice carefully controlled. "The not-so-good news is that Mrs. Broses needs complete bed rest for the remainder of the pregnancy. No physical exertion, minimal stress, constant monitoring. Any more episodes like this could trigger premature labor. At 26 weeks, we need every day we can get." Maria closed her eyes, understanding the implications immediately. Complete bed rest meant she'd be even more dependent on the Hamilton household, more trapped in the web of complications surrounding Dennis's marriage, more vulnerable to whatever Lara was planning. "Doctor," Dennis said quietly, "what if the stress is environmental? What if the best thing for both mother and baby would be a change of scenery?" Dr. Hayes looked between them, clearly picking up on undercurrents he couldn't fully understand. "Mr. Hamilton, Mrs. Broses needs stability above all else. Moving her now could be dangerous." "I understand, but if the current situation is causing the stress, then the current situation needs to change," a new voice interrupted. They all turned to see Lara standing in the doorway, immaculately dressed despite the early hour, her face a mask of concerned propriety. Behind her stood Cobalt Whitmore, the family lawyer, his expression unreadable. "Lara," Dennis stood, his body instinctively positioning itself between his wife and Maria's hospital bed. "What are you doing here?" "Caring for our surrogate and child, of course. When I heard about the emergency, I came immediately." Lara moved into the room with fluid grace, her attention seemingly focused on Maria. "My poor dear, you must have been terrified." "I'm fine now," Maria said carefully, sensing danger in Lara's sudden solicitousness. "Of course you are, and we're going to make sure you stay that way." Lara turned to Dr. Hayes with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Doctor, I've made arrangements for Mrs. Broses to be moved to a private facility where she can receive round-the-clock care." "That's not necessary," Dennis said quickly. "She can rest at the house." "Can she?" Lara's voice carried just enough doubt to plant seeds of uncertainty. "Dennis, Be realistic. Our home is hardly a peaceful environment right now. Mrs. Broses needs professional care, not the chaos of a household in transition. Cobalt Whitmore stepped forward, briefcase in hand. I've taken the liberty of reviewing the surrogacy contract. Given the medical emergency, we have the legal right to ensure the surrogate receives appropriate care, even if that means relocating her. You can't just move me against my will, Maria protested, but even as she said it, she saw the trap closing around her. Of course not, Lara said smoothly. It's entirely your choice, but I think you'll find that the alternative arrangements are in everyone's best interest. Dr. Hayes looked uncomfortable with the legal maneuvering happening around his patient. Mrs. Hamilton, the most important thing is keeping Mrs. Broses calm and stable. Exactly, which is why I've arranged for her to stay at Magnolia Grove, a private maternity facility outside the city. Complete medical supervision, peaceful environment, no stress from outside complications. The meaning was clear. No contact with Dennis, no disruption to Lara's plans, no interference with the narrative she was constructing. I won't go, Maria said, her voice stronger than she felt. Even if staying puts the baby at risk? Lara's question was delivered with surgical precision. Mrs. Broses, surely you don't want your personal feelings to endanger the child you've promised to deliver safely. It was a masterful manipulation, wrapping threat in apparent concern, making Maria's defiance seem selfish and dangerous. Around the room, she could see the doubt creeping into faces. Even Dr. Hayes was considering whether stress relief might outweigh other concerns. The decision is ultimately Mrs. Broses's, Dennis said firmly. And as the biological father, I have a say in medical decisions affecting my child. Do you? Cobalt Whitmore opened his briefcase and extracted a folder. Because according to the contract you signed, Dennis, Mrs. Hamilton has equal parental rights during the pregnancy. In case of disagreement, medical professionals are supposed to act in the best interest of the child. Maria watched the legal net tighten around them, understanding that Lara had planned this contingency long before the current crisis. Every document, every clause, every seemingly innocuous detail had been designed to ensure control when the situation inevitably became complicated. There's something else, Lara continued, her voice taking on a note of regretful necessity. Given the unusual circumstances that have developed, I think it's best if Dennis isn't involved in day-to-day decisions about Mrs. Broses's care. What the hell does that mean? Dennis demanded. It means, Cobalt said quietly, that your emotional involvement has compromised your judgment. The contract allows for such contingencies. Maria felt the walls closing in, saw the future Lara was constructing. Months of isolation, separation from Dennis, complete control over the pregnancy and birth. It was brilliant and cruel and absolutely legal. I need to speak with Dennis privately, Maria said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. I'm afraid that's not advisable, Doctor, Hayes said gently. You need rest, not emotional stress. 5 minutes, Dennis said, his voice carrying an authority that brooked no argument. Everyone else out. Now. After a moment's hesitation, the room cleared, leaving Dennis and Maria alone with the monitors beeping softly in the background. They can't do this, Dennis said immediately. I won't let them. They can and they will, unless we give them a reason not to. Maria struggled to sit up, her mind racing through possibilities. Dennis, there's something I haven't told you. Something that might change everything. What? Maria took a deep breath, knowing that what she was about to say would either save them or destroy them completely. I know about Lara's affair with Marsden Cross. Farah told me. And if Lara wants to play dirty, maybe it's time we stopped playing fair. Dennis stared at her for a long moment, and she could see him weighing the cost of fighting fire with fire. If we do this, he said slowly, there's no going back. Lara will try to destroy us both. She's already trying. At least this way we have ammunition to fight back." Before Dennis could respond, voices in the hallway announced the return of their adversaries. Time was running out, and decisions had to be made. "Whatever happens," Dennis said quietly, taking her hand, "I'm not giving up on us. On any of us." Maria squeezed his fingers, drawing strength from his touch. "Neither am I." The door opened and Lara swept back in with the confidence of someone who held all the cards. But she didn't know that the game was about to change completely, and that sometimes the most dangerous player was the one with nothing left to lose. Chapter 7. In the Valley of Shadows. The war began at dawn with a phone call that shattered Lara's carefully constructed world into 1,000 irreparable pieces. Dennis stood in his study, watching through the window as Maria tended to her garden under Zanara's watchful eye. 3 days had passed since the hospital confrontation, 3 days during which he'd quietly gathered ammunition for the battle he'd never wanted to fight. In his hand, he held the photographs Piers had delivered an hour ago, images that would end his marriage and quite possibly destroy everyone involved. The study door burst open without warning, and Lara swept in like a hurricane, her perfect composure finally cracked beyond repair. "You bastard," she hissed, waving a manila envelope. "You hired someone to follow me." "I hired someone to document what half of Charleston already knows," Dennis replied calmly, though his heart was pounding. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Lara's face went white, then red, then settled into something cold and calculating. "I should have known you'd fight dirty." "I learned from the best." Dennis moved to his desk, maintaining distance between them. "Sit down, Lara. We need to talk." "About what? Your pathetic attempt at blackmail? About ending this marriage with some dignity intact, for Peter's sake, if nothing else?" Lara laughed, but it sounded more like breaking glass. "Dignity? You're sleeping with our surrogate and you want to talk about dignity. I'm in love with Maria. There's a difference." "Is there? Because from where I stand, it looks like you've been lying to me for months while playing house with that little country mouse." Dennis felt his temper flare but kept his voice level. "I've been lying to myself for years, Lara, about our marriage, about what Peter needs, about what I deserve. Maria just helped me see the truth." "The truth?" Lara moved closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "The truth is that you're a weak man who can't handle a strong woman. You need someone to worship you, to make you feel important, to stroke your massive ego. The truth is that I married you for all the wrong reasons, and I've spent 5 years trying to make it right. But some things can't be fixed, Lara. Some marriages are dead from the beginning." Lara stared at him for a long moment, and Dennis saw something shift in her expression. A recognition that this conversation was different from all their previous fights. "What do you want?" she asked finally. "I want a divorce. Clean, quiet, amicable. I want joint custody of Peter with generous visitation. I want Maria left alone to carry our child in peace." Dennis picked up a folder from his desk. "In exchange, these photographs never see the light of day, and we both walk away with our reputations intact. And if I refuse, then we both lose everything. Your affair becomes public knowledge. Peter gets caught in a custody battle that will scar him for life, and the whole ugly mess plays out in the society pages for everyone to judge." Lara was quiet for so long that Dennis wondered if she was considering his offer. When she finally spoke, her voice was deadly calm. "You think you've won, don't you? You think love conquers all and you'll ride off into the sunset with your pregnant princess and live happily ever after. I think we can both walk away from this with some dignity if we choose to." Dignity. Lara tested the word like it left a bad taste in her mouth. "Do you know what I gave up for this marriage, Dennis?" Do you have any idea what I sacrificed to be the perfect Hamilton wife? Lara. I gave up my career, my independence, my own dreams, to play mother to another woman's child and wife, to a man who was still in love with a ghost. And now you want me to give up the life we built together for some nobody who spreads her legs for money? The crude language was so unlike Lara's usual careful speech that Dennis realized she was more shattered than she was letting on. This isn't about Maria, he said gently. This is about the fact that we never should have gotten married in the first place. No, Lara said, her voice breaking slightly. This is about the fact that I wasn't enough. I was never enough. Not for you, not for Peter, not for anyone. For a moment, Dennis caught a glimpse of the vulnerable woman underneath Lara's polished exterior, and he felt something that might have been pity. Lara, you deserve someone who loves you for who you are, not who I needed you to be. Don't. Lara straightened, the moment of vulnerability disappearing behind her usual mask. Don't you dare try to make this about what's best for me. This is about what you want, and you've never cared about the cost to anyone else. Before Dennis could respond, a commotion outside drew their attention to the window. Maria was doubled over in the garden, Zenara supporting her while calling for help. Oh, God, Dennis breathed, then ran for the door. He reached Maria just as she collapsed onto the garden path, her face pale and twisted with pain. Blood stained her dress and her breathing was shallow and rapid. Call doctor. Hayes, Dennis ordered Zenara while scooping Maria into his arms. Tell him we're bringing her in. Dennis, Maria whispered, clutching at his shirt. The baby. I can feel something's wrong. You're going to be fine, he promised, but his heart was racing with terror. Both of you are going to be fine. The ride to the hospital was a nightmare of sirens and flashing lights, of Maria slipping in and out of consciousness, while Dennis held her hand and prayed to a God he'd stopped believing in years ago. By the time they reached Charleston Memorial, she was bleeding heavily, and the contractions were coming fast and hard. Dr. Hayes met them at the emergency entrance, his usually calm demeanor showing cracks of concern. How far apart are the contractions? 3 minutes, Dennis said, helping transfer Maria to the gurney. She collapsed in the garden. There's so much blood. We need to get her to surgery. Now. The next hours blurred together in a haze of waiting room coffee and sterile corridors, of Dennis pacing like a caged animal while doctors worked to save the woman he loved and the child they'd created together. Piers arrived sometime after midnight, followed by Farah, both of them offering silent support in the face of circumstances that had spiraled beyond anyone's control. The babies are fighting, Dr. Hayes explained when he finally emerged from surgery, exhaustion written in every line of his face. We managed to stop the bleeding and delay labor, but Mrs. Brosis is in critical condition. The next 24 hours will tell us everything. Babies. Dennis felt the world tilt sideways. Did you say babies? Twins. Identical girls. Mrs. Brosis didn't know. Apparently, they were hiding behind each other during the ultrasounds. Dr. Hayes managed a tired smile. They're fighters, both of them. But at 26 weeks, they need more time to develop. Dennis sank into a waiting room chair, his powerful frame seeming to collapse under the weight of what was happening. Twins, 2 daughters who might not survive, carried by a woman who might not survive delivering them. Can I see her? For a few minutes. But she needs rest, Mr. Hamilton. This kind of trauma. It takes everything out of a person. Maria looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, surrounded by machines that beeped and hummed with electronic vigilance. Her dark skin had an ashen undertone that made Dennis's chest tighten with fear, but when she opened her eyes and saw him, her smile was radiant. Twins, she whispered. Can you believe it? I can't believe you, Dennis said, taking her hand carefully. Fighting for them like that. You're the strongest person I know. They're going to be beautiful, Dennis. I can feel it. strong and stubborn, and absolutely perfect. Like their mother. Maria's eyes filled with tears. I'm not their mother. Not legally. You're their mother in every way that matters. Dennis leaned down to kiss her forehead. And when this is over, when you're both safe, we're going to figure out how to be a family. All of us. What about Lara? Dennis was quiet for a moment, thinking about the conversation that had been interrupted by crisis. Lara and I are getting divorced. Whatever happens next, we're going to face it together. Promise me something, Maria said, her voice growing drowsy from medication. If something happens to me, if I don't make it through this, promise me you'll take care of them. Love them enough for both of us. Nothing's going to happen to you, Dennis said fiercely. I won't let it. But even as he made the promise, Dennis knew that some things were beyond his control. All he could do was hold Maria's hand, watch the monitors trace the rhythm of 2 tiny heartbeats, and wait for dawn to tell them whether love was enough to overcome the darkness that threatened to swallow them all. Chapter 8. The Price of Truth. 48. Hours after the world nearly ended, it began again with the sound of 2 tiny heartbeats echoing through the NICU like a symphony of hope. Maria stood at the observation window, her reflection ghost-like against the glass, watching the impossibly small forms of her daughters fighting for life in their heated cocoons. The doctors had stabilized her condition, but the twins, born at 26 weeks, faced a battle that would determine whether love was stronger than biology, whether will could overcome the cruel mathematics of premature birth. They're beautiful, Dennis said softly, coming to stand beside her. His imposing frame cast a protective shadow over her smaller form, and she could feel the warmth radiating from his muscular body. He'd barely left the hospital in 2 days, surviving on coffee and determination. His usually perfect appearance rumpled with exhaustion and fear, though his powerful presence remained undiminished. Penelope weighed 2 pounds, 3 ounces. Maria recited the statistics like a prayer. Isabella was 2 pounds even. Dr. Hayes says their lungs are developing well, but the next few weeks will be critical. Penelope and Isabella. Dennis smiled for the first time since the crisis began. When did you decide on names? While I was unconscious. I dreamed about them, Dennis. They were grown-up, beautiful women with your eyes and your gentleness. Penelope was bold and fearless. Isabella was thoughtful and wise. They were perfect. Dennis took her hand, intertwining their fingers. They are perfect, just like their mother. The moment was interrupted by approaching footsteps, and they turned to see Lara walking down the corridor with Cobalt Whitmore at her side. She looked impeccable as always, but Maria could see something different in her posture, a brittleness that suggested the controlled facade was finally cracking. Mrs. Brosas, Lara said with forced politeness, I'm glad to see you're recovering. Thank you. Maria's voice was carefully neutral, but she moved closer to Dennis instinctively. I came to discuss the current situation, Lara continued, her gaze moving to the twins in their incubators. Obviously, the premature birth has complicated our original arrangements. The only thing that's complicated is your continued presence here, Dennis said coldly. These are my daughters, Lara. You have no claim on them. Actually, Cobalt Whitmore interjected, opening his ever-present briefcase, the surrogacy contract is quite clear. Mrs. Hamilton has parental rights that supersede. The surrogacy contract is void, a new voice interrupted. They all turned to see Piers Thorne approaching, with a woman Maria didn't recognize, middle-aged, professionally dressed, carrying a folder that looked ominously official. Dennis, Piers said grimly, I'd like you to meet Angela Morrison from the district attorney's office. Laura's face went white. What is this? This, Dennis said quietly, is the end of our marriage and the beginning of the truth. Angela Morrison stepped forward with the calm authority of someone accustomed to delivering life-altering news. Mrs. Hamilton, we have evidence of extensive financial fraud, tax evasion, and embezzlement from your husband's companies. The surrogacy contract, along with all other marital agreements, is legally invalid due to the criminal activities involved in funding them. That's impossible, Laura breathed, but her voice lacked conviction. We have records of shell companies, offshore accounts, and falsified documents spanning the past 3 years. Your affair with Marsden Cross wasn't just personal, it was part of a systematic plan to embezzle money from Hamilton Industries and transfer it to accounts you both controlled. Maria felt Dennis go rigid beside her, understanding finally hitting him like a physical blow. "You've been stealing from me," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "All this time, the financial problems, the cash flow issues. You've been bleeding the company dry." "It was never about money," Laura said desperately. "It was about security, about protecting myself." "It was about greed," Angela Morrison said flatly. "And it's over. Mrs. Hamilton, you're under arrest." The next few minutes passed in a blur of Miranda rights and handcuffs, of Laura's composure finally shattering completely as she realized the magnitude of her fall from grace. Cobalt Whitmore distanced himself with the speed of a man who'd been paid well but not enough to go to prison, leaving Laura to face the consequences alone. "Dennis," Laura called out as the officers prepared to lead her away, "please, Peter needs his mother. Whatever I've done, don't let my son suffer for it." "Peter needs love," Dennis replied, his voice heavy with sadness rather than anger. "Something you never learned how to give." After Laura was gone, the hospital corridor felt strangely quiet, despite the usual medical bustle. Maria sank into a nearby chair, overwhelmed by the rapid collapse of everything that had seemed so permanent just days ago. "Are you all right?" Dennis asked, kneeling beside her chair. "I don't know what I am. Relieved, terrified, confused." Maria looked toward the NICU where their daughters continued their fight for life. "What happens now?" "Now we focus on what matters," Dennis said firmly. "The twins, Peter, building something real from the wreckage. And us." Dennis took both her hands in his gray eyes steady and sure. "I want to marry you, Maria. Not because it's convenient or expected or legally necessary, but because I love you. Because you make me want to be the man I was always supposed to be." "Dennis, I know it's too soon. I know you need time to heal, time to figure out who you are outside of all this chaos. But I want you to know that when you're ready, when the twins are strong enough, when everything settles, I'll be here. We'll be here." Before Maria could respond, a commotion from the NICU drew their attention. Dr. Hayes was moving quickly between the incubators, calling for additional equipment. "Isabella's having breathing problems," he explained tersely as they rushed to the observation window. "Her lungs aren't developing as quickly as we'd hoped." Maria pressed her hands against the glass, watching in helpless agony as medical professionals worked to save her daughter. The tiny form looked impossibly fragile under the harsh medical lighting, fighting a battle she was too small to understand. "She's strong," Dennis said, his arm around Maria's shoulders. "She's got your spirit and Sarah's stubborn streak. She's going to make it." "Sarah? My first wife. She would have loved them, Maria. She would have loved you." They stood vigil through the night, taking turns sitting beside the incubators when the nurses allowed it, whispering stories and promises to daughters who might or might not survive to hear them. Peter arrived with Feyre in the morning, his eyes wide with wonder at the sight of his baby sisters. "They're so tiny," he breathed, pressing his face to the glass. "Are they going to be okay?" "They're fighters," Maria told him, pulling him close. "Just like you. Can I be their big brother? For real, I mean." Maria looked at Dennis, seeing her own hope reflected in his eyes. "Would you like that?" "More than anything. I've been practicing brother things, like teaching them to ride bikes and protecting them from monsters." I think they'd be lucky to have you as their big brother, Maria said, her voice thick with emotion. As the days passed, Isabella's condition stabilized and both twins began the slow process of growing stronger. Laura's arrest had made headlines, but Dennis's legal team managed to keep the family's private struggles out of most coverage. The community rallied around them in unexpected ways. Zenara brought homemade soup, Mrs. Whitfield organized a prayer circle, and even strangers sent cards and gifts for the fighting babies. "We're going to make it," Dennis said one evening as they watched Penelope grip his finger with surprising strength. "All of us. We're going to be okay." Maria leaned against his shoulder, finally allowing herself to believe in happy endings. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too. All of you." Outside the NICU windows, Charleston Harbor sparkled in the evening light, and Maria thought about how sometimes the most beautiful dawns came after the darkest nights. Chapter 9. Before the Dawn. 6 weeks in the NICU had taught Maria that miracles came in increments. An ounce gained, a breathing tube removed. The first time tiny fingers wrapped around hers with real strength. She sat beside Isabella's incubator in the pre-dawn quiet, humming the same lullaby her grandmother had sung to her decades ago in Georgia. At 4 pounds, 2 ounces, Isabella was finally strong enough to breathe on her own, though she remained dwarfed by the medical equipment that had kept her alive through the darkest weeks. "You're going to love the world outside this plastic box," Maria whispered, her finger tracing patterns on the clear surface that separated them. "There are gardens to explore and books to read, and a big brother who can't wait to teach you about baseball." "She's listening," Dennis said softly, settling into the chair beside her. He looked different these days, lighter somehow, as if Laura's arrest had lifted a weight he'd carried for so long he'd forgotten what it felt like to stand straight. "Penelope was fussing earlier, but she settled down when I started reading to her. Dr. Hayes says they might be ready to go home next week." "Home." Dennis tested the word like he was learning a new language. I keep forgetting that means something different now. Over the past month, Dennis had quietly transformed the Hamilton estate. Laura's belongings had been packed away, her formal sitting rooms converted into bright, child-friendly spaces. The master bedroom had been redecorated in soft blues and whites, with a nursery adjoining it that looked like something from a fairy tale. "Are you sure about all the changes?" Maria asked, not for the first time. "It's been your home for years." "It was never home," Dennis said simply. His muscular frame relaxed in the hospital chair in a way it never had been in his own house. "It was just a house where I slept and ate and pretended to be happy. Home is wherever you and the girls and Peter are." Before Maria could respond, Peter's voice echoed through the NICU as he arrived with fare for his daily visit to his sisters. "Miss Maria, they let me bring Isabella a present." At 8 years old, Peter had appointed himself chief protector and entertainer of his baby sisters. His backpack was always full of books to read to them, drawings he'd made, and small treasures he thought they might like when they were older. "What did you bring today?" Maria asked, pulling him into a gentle hug. "A music box that plays the song you sing to them. Aunt Fairy helped me pick it out." Peter's face glowed with pride as he showed off his gift, a delicate silver box with a tiny ballerina that spun to the melody of Brahms' lullaby. "It's perfect, sweetheart. They're going to love it." As Peter settled into his routine of talking to each twin, updating them on everything happening in the outside world, Fair pulled Dennis and Maria aside. "The divorce papers were finalized this morning," she said quietly. "Lara signed everything from prison. It's over, Dennis. You're free." Maria felt something tight in her chest finally loosen. For weeks, she'd been afraid that Lara might find some way to fight back, to reclaim the daughters she'd never wanted, or to drag Peter into a custody battle that would scar him forever. "What about the criminal charges?" Dennis asked. 7 years minimum, possibly 12, depending on plea negotiations. Marsden Cross is cooperating fully to reduce his own sentence. Fair's expression softened. She won't be a factor in your lives for a very long time. That evening, after the twins had been settled for the night and Peter had fallen asleep, reading in the hospital waiting room, Dennis and Maria found themselves alone on the hospital roof garden that had become their refuge during the longest days. "I have something for you," Dennis said, pulling a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. "Dennis, no." Maria stepped back, shaking her head. "It's too soon. The girls are still fighting. Peter's still adjusting. Everything is still so uncertain." "That's exactly why I want to do this now," Dennis interrupted gently. "Because life is uncertain, Maria. Because tomorrow isn't guaranteed, and I don't want to waste another day pretending that what we have isn't real and rare and worth celebrating." He dropped to one knee right there among the hospital roof garden's struggling flowers, holding out a ring that caught the last rays of sunset. "Maria Brosas, you came into my life carrying my child and ended up carrying my heart. You've shown me what love looks like when it's brave and selfless and absolutely true. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife and Peter's mother and help me raise our daughters to be as strong and beautiful as you are?" Maria looked down at this man who had become everything she'd never dared to dream of. Successful but humble, strong but gentle, a father who loved fiercely, and a partner who saw her as an equal rather than a convenience. "The ring is beautiful," she said, noticing how the diamond caught the light like captured starfire. "It was Sarah's," Dennis admitted. "She made me promise to give it to the woman who helped me learn to love again. I hope that's okay." Tears blurred Maria's vision as she understood the full weight of what he was offering, not just his future, but his past, his son, his whole complicated, beautiful life. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Dennis. Yes to all of it." The ring slid onto her finger like it had been waiting there all along, and when Dennis kissed her, Maria tasted tears and promises and the beginning of everything she'd ever wanted. They were married 3 weeks later in the hospital chapel, with Isabella and Penelope sleeping peacefully in portable cribs beside the altar. Peter served as ring-bearer and best man, his small chest puffed with pride at his important dual role. Fere was maid of honor. Zenara provided the flowers from the estate garden, and Dr. Hayes gave the bride away, having become something of a father figure during the long months of medical crisis. The ceremony was simple, intimate, perfect in its imperfection. When Isabella fussed during the vows, Peter picked her up and rocked her gently, whispering that Mama and Daddy were just promising to love each other forever. When Penelope's feeding schedule interrupted the kiss, Maria laughed and said it was good practice for the rest of their lives. "I pronounce you husband and wife," the hospital chaplain said with a warm smile, "and may God bless this family that has already overcome so much together." As they kissed again, surrounded by the people who had supported them through the darkest times, Maria felt the last piece of her guarded heart finally surrender to the possibility of happily ever after. The reception was held in the hospital's family room, with takeout from Charleston's best restaurant and a cake that Zenara had somehow managed to bake in the estate kitchen and transport without disaster. It wasn't the wedding Maria had imagined as a little girl, but it was perfect because it was theirs, full of love and laughter and the promise of tomorrow. "What are you thinking about?" Dennis asked as they swayed to soft music playing from someone's phone. The twins finally settled and Peter curled up asleep in a nearby chair. "I'm thinking about how this all started with a contract," Maria said, her head on his shoulder. "A business arrangement that was supposed to be clean and simple and temporary. And now I can't imagine loving anyone the way I love you. Can't imagine any other life than this one we're building together." "No regrets?" Maria looked around the improvised reception, at Peter sleeping peacefully, at their daughters breathing steadily in their cribs, at Feyre and Zenara cleaning up with the efficiency of people who had become family by choice rather than blood. "Only one," she said softly. "What's that?" "I regret that my grandmother can't see this. She always said love would find me when I stopped looking for it, when I started looking for ways to serve others instead." Maria smiled through tears. "She would have loved you, Dennis. She would have said you have good hands and a gentle heart. I would have loved her too. Anyone who raised you must have been extraordinary." As the evening wound down and they prepared to take the twins home for the first time, Maria realized that home had become something entirely different from what she'd expected. It wasn't a place or a building or even a set of circumstances. It was this collection of people who had chosen to love each other through everything life could throw at them. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Hamilton?" Dennis asked, lifting Penelope's car seat with practiced ease. "Ready," Maria said, adjusting Isabella's blanket one more time. "Let's go home." Chapter 10. The Heart's True Covenant. 5 years later, Maria Hamilton stood at her kitchen window, watching the most beautiful chaos unfold in the garden that had started everything. Peter, now 13 and gangly with adolescence, was teaching 4-year-old Isabella the proper technique for hitting a baseball, while Penelope sat in the dirt, more interested in examining earthworms than learning sports. 2-year-old Thomas, their surprise blessing who had arrived 3 years after the twins, toddled between them all, chattering in the half-language that only his siblings seemed to understand completely. "Strike 3, Peter called out as Isabella swung wildly at his gentle pitch. "That's not fair," Isabella protested, her hands on her hips in a gesture that was pure Maria. "You throwed it too high." "Through," Penelope corrected absently, not looking up from her scientific investigation. "And Peter was accommodating your height differential appropriately." Maria smiled, shaking her head at her daughter's vastly different personalities. Isabella was all fire and passion, never backing down from a challenge, while Penelope approached everything with the careful analysis of a born scholar. Thomas was still developing his own identity, but early signs suggested he'd inherited Dennis's diplomatic nature and gift for bringing people together. "Mama!" Isabella called, spotting her at the window. "Come see how good I'm getting." "In a minute, sweetheart," Maria called back, stirring the soup that had become a Sunday tradition. The kitchen smelled like home, herbs from the garden, bread baking in the oven, and the lingering scent of the coffee Dennis had made that morning before disappearing into his study to review plans for the new children's wing at Charleston Memorial Hospital. The Hamilton Foundation, established after Laura's assets were recovered and redistributed, had become Dennis's passion project. What had started as guilt-driven charity work had evolved into a genuine calling, funding medical research and family support programs throughout the Southeast. Maria had gone back to school, earning her nursing degree while the twins were toddlers, and now split her time between the hospital's pediatric ward and the Foundation's community outreach programs. "Smells incredible in here," Dennis said, appearing in the kitchen doorway with that smile that still made her heart skip after all these years. His muscular frame filled the doorway with the same commanding presence that had first taken her breath away, though now it spoke of protection and home rather than intimidation. "Zenara's secret recipe," Maria replied, moving into his powerful arms with the easy grace of long-married couples. She finally agreed to write down all her grandmother's cooking wisdom. "Thank God. I was afraid we'd lose that soup forever when she retires." At 72, Zenara had earned the right to slow down, but she stubbornly refused to leave the family she'd helped raise. Instead, she'd moved into the renovated apartment above the carriage house, close enough to spoil the children, but far enough away to maintain her independence. "Speaking of retirement," Dennis said, nuzzling Maria's neck, I had an interesting conversation with Dr. Hayes yesterday. Oh, he's stepping down as chief of pediatrics next year. He recommended someone for the position, someone with extensive NICU experience and a passion for family-centered care. Maria pulled back to look at him, her heart pounding. Dennis, no, I'm not qualified. You're the most qualified person I know. You've lived through what those families go through. You understand the fear, the hope, the way love can sustain people through impossible circumstances. Before Maria could argue further, the kitchen door burst open and their domestic tranquility was invaded by 3 children and 1 exuberant golden retriever named Biscuit. "Mama, Thomas ate a bug," Isabella announced with the gleeful horror of a big sister reporting wrongdoing. "It was a roly-poly," Penelope corrected with scientific precision. "Technically an isopod, not an insect, and it probably won't hurt him, although the nutritional value is questionable." Thomas looked up from where he was being thoroughly licked by Biscuit, dirt streaking his chubby cheeks, and grinned unrepentantly. "Crunchy. Oh, sweetheart." Maria knelt to wipe his face while Dennis dissolved into laughter. "We eat food from the kitchen, not from the garden." "But Peter said bugs is protein," Thomas protested. "Are protein," Penelope corrected again. And Peter was speaking theoretically about survival situations, not suggesting actual consumption. "Thanks for the clarification, Professor," Peter said, ruffling Penelope's carefully braided hair. "Remind me never to take you camping." As Maria cleaned Thomas's face and hands, she caught Dennis watching them with that expression she'd learned to recognize. The look of a man who couldn't quite believe his good fortune. "What?" she asked. "Just this." "All of it. Sometimes I can't believe it's real." Isabella climbed onto Dennis's lap with the confidence of a child who had never doubted her place in the world. "What can't you believe, Daddy?" "I can't believe how lucky I am to have you and your sister and your brother and your mama all to myself." "And Peter," Isabella added seriously, "and Zenara and Biscuit and Aunt Fere." "And Peter and Zenara and Biscuit and Aunt Fere," Dennis agreed solemnly. "And great-grandmama in heaven," Penelope added softly. Maria's throat tightened. They'd told the children about Sarah, Peter's birth mother who had loved him first and best, and about Maria's grandmother who had taught her that love multiplied rather than divided when shared freely. "And great-grandmama in heaven," Dennis confirmed, his voice gentle. That evening, after the children were bathed and storied and tucked into beds, Dennis and Maria sat on the porch swing that had replaced the formal outdoor furniture from Lara's era. The garden stretched before them in the soft light of evening, vegetables and flowers growing together in productive harmony. "I got a letter from Lyria today," Maria said, settling against Dennis's shoulder. "How is she?" "Good. She's getting married in the fall, to that teacher I told you about. She wants us all to come to Georgia for the wedding." "We'll make it work. The kids should see where their mama grew up." Maria smiled at how easily Dennis had adapted to being part of a larger extended family. Lyria had become Aunt Lyria to the children, sending birthday cards and care packages, visiting whenever she could get away from her job at the county clinic. Mrs. Whitfield had become surrogate grandmother, always ready with fresh cookies and patient ears for childhood troubles. "I've been thinking about the hospital position," Maria said quietly. And I think I want it. Not because you think I should have it, but because I think I could make a difference. Help families the way Dr. Hayes helped us." Dennis tightened his arms around her. "You'll be incredible. Those families will be lucky to have someone who understands what they're going through. It'll mean longer hours, more responsibility, less time for evening swings and garden watching. Then we'll make the time we have count more." "Besides," Dennis grinned, pressing a kiss to the top of her head, Someone has to keep me from turning into one of those stuffed shirt foundation executives who forgets what real life looks like. They sat in comfortable silence, watching fireflies begin their nightly dance among the roses. From upstairs came the sound of Peter practicing guitar. He'd discovered music the way some teenagers discovered rebellion, throwing himself into it with passionate intensity. The twins' room was quiet, but Maria knew from experience that Penelope was probably reading by flashlight under her covers, while Isabella practiced the gymnastics moves that terrified her parents and delighted her coach. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if things had been different?" Maria asked. "If the surrogacy had gone according to plan? If we'd never fallen in love?" Dennis was quiet for so long that Maria wondered if she'd asked the wrong question. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful rather than wistful. "I think we would have found each other eventually. Maybe not in the same way, maybe not as quickly, but I think love that strong doesn't give up easily." "You think we were meant to be?" "I think we were meant to choose each other over and over again, through everything life could throw at us. The circumstances brought us together, but we made the choice to stay." Maria thought about all the choices they'd made over the years. Dennis choosing to fight for their love despite the cost. Maria choosing to risk her heart despite the impossibility of their situation. Both of them choosing to build a family from the broken pieces of their separate pasts. "I love you, Dennis Hamilton," she said, the words as true now as they'd been the first time she'd whispered them in a storm-darkened cottage. "I love you too, Maria Hamilton. All of you, all of this, all of the beautiful mess we've made together." From somewhere in the house came the sound of Thomas crying, probably a nightmare or a need for water, and Maria started to rise. "I'll go," Dennis said, kissing her forehead. "You sit and enjoy the quiet for a few more minutes." As Maria watched her husband disappear into the house to comfort their son, she reflected on the journey that had brought them here. It had started with a contract, a business arrangement meant to fulfill everyone's needs in the cleanest way possible. Instead, it had taught them that the heart's true covenant couldn't be written down or signed in legal offices. Love, real love, was a daily choice to see the best in someone else, to fight for their happiness even when it cost you something, to build a life together one small decision at a time. It was Dennis bringing her coffee in the morning and listening to her dreams for the hospital program. It was Maria supporting his foundation work and understanding that his guilt over Lara drove him to try to fix the world. It was both of them learning to parent not just their biological children, but all the children who had found their way into their hearts. The screen door creaked open, and Dennis emerged carrying a sleepy Thomas, who had apparently decided that parents made better pillows than beds. "Bad dream?" Maria asked, making room on the swing. "Monster under the bed. I explained that Biscuit is on monster patrol tonight, so he should sleep just fine." Thomas snuggled between them, his thumb finding its way to his mouth despite their gentle efforts to break the habit. In the distance, Charleston Harbor sparkled with the lights of evening boats, and Maria thought about how some storms really did wash the world clean, making space for new growth. "Mama," Thomas mumbled around his thumb, "tell me the story about when you and Daddy fell in love." "Again?" Maria laughed softly. "I just told you that story last week. But it's my favorite story. And Penelope says stories get better when you tell them lots of times." Dennis caught Maria's eye over their son's head, his expression full of the shared understanding that came from years of partnership. "Once upon a time," Maria began, her voice soft in the evening quiet, "there was a lady who came to live in a big house to help a family that needed something very special." As she told the story, simplified for young ears but true in all the ways that mattered, Maria realized that the best fairy tales weren't the ones that started with "once upon a time." They were the ones that started with "every single day," because real love wasn't a destination you reached once and stayed forever. It was a journey you chose to take together, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one small act of love at a time. And they lived happily ever after, Thomas asked sleepily. They lived happily ever after, Dennis confirmed, pulling both his wife and son closer. And in the garden where it all began, surrounded by the family they'd chosen and been chosen by, Maria Hamilton knew that some promises were too beautiful to break, too precious to take for granted, and too powerful to be contained by any contract except the one written on the heart.